Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
And welcome to our fourth episode of Autobiography of a Yogi, Line by Line. I'm joined by the fabulous trio, Chris, Priyank, and Mike. Oh, they're not even saying anything. You can say hi. It's okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru. They're feeling very shy today. So in today's episode, we will be running through the next chunk in the book, which mainly talks about Lahiri Mahasaya and the relationship between him and Paramahansa Yogananda and his family. And I think it's a really beautiful part of the book, and there's so much to delve into. So we're going to dive straight on in for you. So it actually begins the paragraph saying, Lahiri Mahasaya left this world shortly after I had entered it. Now, for me, when I first read the book, I thought it meant that, Paramahansa was physically born and then Lahiri Mahasaya stopped. But actually, when I looked up the dates, as we discussed in the last episode, Paramahansa Yogananda was physically born on the 5th of January, 1893. And then Lahiri Mahasaya had his physical body death on the 26th of September, 1895. So it's actually 2 years and 8 months, perhaps, is it? So it's quite a long time. Yeah, Priyank. Is incorrect?
Is that correct? I think that's incorrect. Yeah, I think he was.
Oh.
Yeah, I think there's 10 years. Is that correct, people? Chris, you had it last episode.
It was correct, yeah.
Then he would have been 2 years. Oh, only 2 years.
He passed in 1895, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I have.
September. Mm-hmm.
But Paramahansa Yogananda was born. Okay, there's some sort of quirk here, because we're going to relate the story of young Mukunda meeting Lahiri Mahasaya.
Yeah.
So
it's a vision, though, right?
Maybe. I think very good vision.
Well, I'll tell you what, listeners, viewers, if you know the facts, please do tell us. I thought this was correct, but I'd love to know if I'm right or not. So yeah, let us know. Who knows? But anyway, dates aside, I wondered if there was any sort of physical significance between, Lahiri Mahasaya passing his physical body and Yogananda entering this world. And I wondered if anyone had any insights as to perhaps why that might be.
Got a theory, just a theory.
Go on.
My theory is that if there was overlap, and for example, he was Yogananda, Sri Yukteswar was around and Lahiri Mahasaya was around, for a few years, then the lineage would be unclear as to whose guru is whose. Here, the demarcation is very clear. Even though there was 2 years, supposedly 2 years overlap between their lives, physical birth lives, in Yogananda's teen and 20s when he met Sri Yukteswar, he was obviously Lahiri Mahasaya wasn't around, so there was no confusion as to the lineage and who comes after whom.
I like that. Mike?
Yeah, very good. I feel like the life of an avatar often has a list of things that they want to do in this incarnation. And then once they ticked all the boxes, they go okay, I'm done, I'm off. And being there for Yogananda to be born, especially because the parents of Yogananda are his disciples. I think that was definitely something where he felt like I should be there for that. And then we don't really know if that happened, but I assume that after Yogananda was born, they took him to Lahiri Mahasaya and he gave him his blessing. And for all those things, he probably wanted to be there. And then once he thought everything is looking going the right track, I told them, your son is going to be an avatar. He's going to find his guru, but it's not going to be me. It's going to be my other disciple who he will meet later. So I feel like that's probably one of the reasons why he stayed. And then once he felt like everything is done, I can go now.
The what Mike referenced there about the blessing, that's not in the autobiography of a yogi. So Lahiri Mahasaya blessing the baby Mukunda. It's not in. I don't think it's in the autobiography, but it was certainly in the Awake film, where they physically showed this beautiful, very, very devotional scene of the Guruji's parents, actors obviously, taking the baby to a very, very real life, like Lahiri Mahasaya actor, and the actor, Lahiri Mahasaya, blesses him by putting his hands on the baby's head. But again, we don't know if that was artistic license or cinematic. Just for drama. We don't know if it actually happened.
I do also wonder if Lahiri Mahasaya had still been in his physical form living, would Paramahansa Yogananda have then been a little confused? Because of Lahiri Mahasaya's passing, he also wanted his own guru in living form, didn't he? And he really yearned for that. And I wonder if that would have shifted the course of existence had Lahiri Mahasaya actually still been physically there. I don't know. It's quite interesting to ponder on and think about.
I think with the story that we're about to read, it probably wouldn't, I'm going to say, probably wouldn't actually have much merit, because as we're going to delve into, Yogananda had such a connection to Lahiri Mahasaya that he was essentially there, in a form with him. And it was a question I thought to myself, like, why did Yogananda not immediately take to this great individual and presence as a guru? Surely that would have been very strong within him to think that way. But given that his mother and the connection that his mother had with Lahiri Mahasaya as well, but Yogananda being an avatar and all the rest of it, I'm sure there is going to be an underlying thread to be able to draw him to a different path. But it is curious for sure.
Lahiri Mahasaya was famous for rediscovering or being the first one who was initiated into Kriya Yoga by Babaji, right? And then a lot of his disciples, he would have given Kriya Yoga, and also his parents. And I wonder if Yogananda was initiated into Kriya Yoga really early on in his youth, probably by his parents. And he was probably using it already throughout his teens and when he grew up, but it's just speculation.
We love speculation.
too. I'm trying to recall because I thought at some point he was initiated by Swami Sri Yukteswar, right? In the book.
Yep. That happens.
So it shall all be revealed later on.
And he said, and he specifically says that, you know, I've had learned this technique of many people, but it never had as much potency as when my master Sri Yukteswar initiated me.
There you go.
That's when
so
it became
Mike,
alive.
You're probably right. He did get that from his parents. Imagine your parents being that advanced. Yeah, would have been amazing. So obviously Lahiri Mahasaya had this very significant presence, didn't he? And he goes on to say that as they moved around the different cities for his father's job, that the family would have a shrine, and they would take that shrine with them wherever they went. And on that shrine would be the photograph of Lahiri Mahasaya. And that, you know, they would offer flowers and, you know, pour their devotions in that space, which I thought was really lovely. It's very sweet to think of the family meditating together, but he specifically says his mother. He never mentions his father, which is, again, quite interesting. But I do feel like there's a lesson there. It's a very tiny piece, but it's, to me anyway, it's saying that we can take that wherever we go. It doesn't matter if we move around 20 times a year or a month, we can still meditate. you can still create a space of devotion. It's not limited to being in a statuary place. Yeah.
Perhaps that was the inspiration for the Self-Realization Fellowship printing the travel altar, which I use very often wherever I go. I always take one. I have one in my wallet as well. Does anyone else use a travel altar? I think, Lauren, you use the travel altar as your main altar, don't you?
Yes, that is stationary on my meditation table. It's funny, my travel altar used to be this book. I'm holding up the Autobiography of a Yogi. I carried this around with me everywhere. This went to Greece with me. It went to all sorts of places. But yeah, just having that picture there really made things a lot more special. Yeah.
As well for that, just in the same way.
Mike?
But those are different altars, right? Like I assume, Lauren, you have like the paper one, and Priyank, you have like one that's as big as it would fit into
I've got
wallet,
both.
right?
I've got both. Yeah, my wallet one and my bag.
Very cool. I don't have one that fits in my wallet, but I have a guru picture in my wallet, and I have an altar that fits right on my dashboard.
Oh,
nice.
Nice. What about you, Chris?
Yeah. I have the travel one that I used. I remember I had to buy multiple ones. I bought so many pictures over the years. A bunch got lost during kind of one of my few changes of house. I was very upset with that, but I had to buy new ones just to make sure I had them in my life. Like you, I have the Autobiography of a Yogi kind of there, and Yogananda's face kind of constantly there. And I actually have a digital photo frame, which is kind of cool because I have all the gurus that are popping up individually on the digital frame, which is really, really great as well.
Do you ever find that you're particularly drawn to one when it pops up?
Coincident or not, you'll have these moments where you're talking about something and then poof, Guruji's face just pops up, or Lahiri Mahasaya is just there and squinting at you, kind of thing. It's pretty special, yeah.
Oh, it is. As the chapter will go on to say, we'll delve into more of that later about the power of a photograph and how that can really change our lives. But before we do, it's a very small piece in this paragraph, but he does say how they offered flowers dipped in fragrant sandalwood paste. And it perked my attention because I realized that actually, being quite a rookie newbie on this path is actually not something that I've done. And actually something that I even knew about it, but I didn't know why. I didn't really understand. So I went on Google. Sorry, it happened. Couldn't get my dictionary out on this one. So I thought it might be nice in case anyone else doesn't know, like myself. And we can just share a bit about that and what it means. And hopefully one day I can take this intellectual knowledge into real life, into my practices. But I came across a little paragraph that briefly summed it up, and then we'll go into more detail from the lovely Priyank. But it says that the offering of flowers in a temple is part of the worship process, and this is called a puja. Pu stands for pushpam, or flowers, and ja stands for japa, or chanting the holy names of gods or goddesses. Offering flowers in a puja has different benefits and importance. It's not just a way of conveying our devotion to divine entities. Flowers can attract the subtlest particles of pavitrax. Is that the right pronunciation?
Pavitrax.
There you go. Right there, from the idols. It's a way of transmitting God's Chaitanya to the devotees. Wow. Priyank, would you like to give our listeners some further info?
The actual Sanskrit mantra that you'd use in this, so you'd hold a flower like this, and then you'd offer it to it's very specific. It's a mudra actually. This so it's a very specific way of doing the offering, and use your right hand. Was reason for that. But the mantra is Pushpanjalam Samarpayami Shri Guru Charana Kamalabhyo Namaha, which means offering the flower to your guru's lotus feet, and that's the actual mantra that you'd use. And then the prayer is much longer. But yes, the flowers represent nature or prakriti. The word prakriti is made of 3 syllables. Prakriti. In Devi Bhagavatam, Sri Narada describes prakriti as thus. The prefix pra is the word prakriti, means exalted or superior, excellent, and the suffix kriti denotes creation. So the goddess Devi, who is the most excellent in the work of creation, is known as Devi Prakriti. Pra signifies a sattva guna, the most exalted quality. Kri denotes the rajo guna, and Ti denotes the tamo guna. The sattva guna is considered the highest, as it is perfectly clear and free from any impurities whatsoever. The rajo guna is considered intermediate, as it has this defect. It spreads a veil over the reality of things, so as not to allow men to understand the true reality. While the tamo guna is considered worst, as it completely hides the real knowledge. Thus, when we offer flowers to the deities, we are actually praying to the energies of that gods or goddesses that they represent, to trigger them within ourselves, thus eradicating our tamo, rajo gunas, and bless us with the sattva guna, which is conducive to the flowering of consciousness. Very nice.
Ooh.
Beautiful.
Do you feel like that accurately describes it for you when you're...
Yeah, it's more detail than I ever knew.
There you go. We're all learning.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And
is it something... Oh, no,
yeah,
go on. No, go
dipped
on,
in sandalwood paste is a very expensive expensive enterprise, because the sandalwood's really expensive. I remember I think £1 for pound, I think it's worth more than gold or something like that. Yeah, it's crazy. Something crazy like that. I've got like a block like this I paid a lot of money for, and then like I grate it sometimes and then make a little paste, and then you can, and it's really fragrant. So it's not fragrant when it's in its like just natural state, but when you cut it or make it slightly powdery, then it becomes this phenomenal fragrance. And obviously everyone seems to use it in all sorts of fragrances and things like that, don't they?
It's interesting that you really like it, because obviously Paramahansa Yogananda obviously did, because he put it right there in the book. But it's a really lovely scent, isn't it? It's quite powerful. Does anyone have anything else to say before we move on, or shall we head on? Yes, Mike.
I found it interesting that he also mentioned the frankincense and myrrh, which is something that, like, I grew up Catholic. It's something that is being used there a lot. Like, if you've ever been at mass in a Catholic church, that smell of frankincense, you will never forget about it. Like, this is just and obviously they do it because they say the 3 kings brought it to Jesus when he was born, right? So it's basically a custom that's been there through the ages. And as Guruji describes in the Second Coming of Christ, the 3 kings, they were coming from India to create Yogananda. And so this kind of explains that this is something that is being used in India for worship, and this is a custom that was passed on like that and made its way into Christianity.
No, I'll say something slightly controversial on this side. I was in Italy, in Lecce with my parents, they were visiting and they did a tour, and they were going through the various various ancient sites there. And the tour guide said that the frankincense was used to cover up smells, because in the Middle Ages and some time ago, it wasn't exactly common to have excellent hygiene and showers and everything every day. So it was useful for that purpose. But that was what the tour guide told my parents, and my parents told me. So it's not the most reliable information, but it is interesting. Maybe it has more than one use.
Well, yeah, multi-uses. Why not? But it's still a lovely fragrance either way. So that's probably why you're probably right, actually, Chris. If they did use it, they'd want something that smelled really lovely. So why would they not use that? So yeah, it's really nice that this image that we have of, the family of young Yogananda or Mejda at the time, offering those flowers in that devotion. But interestingly comes the next line, and I am going to read it verbatim because I think that it needs to be read. It then says, "We honoured the divinity that had found full expression in Lahiri Mahasaya." There is so much in that one sentence, I feel, anyway. Yes, I think we need to discuss this. Yeah, Priyank.
It's such a thick expression, isn't it? And it's so universal as well. And I remember when I read this, my red highlighter of favorite quotes on Kindle has come out for this line. So I'm in full agreement with you. And I love that that it can be used for any realized master, because any realized master, their divinity finds full expression in.
And also, I think it's a lesson for us in there, that's what we're honoring. It's the divinity, it's the full expression of that divinity, but that's its essence. I think it's all too easy to get caught up on the external figure, but having that in our minds of it's the divinity within, it's the God within that incarnation in this physical flesh. It's another lesson. It's so great how he teaches us so much in this book, but without trying to teach us. Chris,
if you could apply this to yourself, what would you take away from it? Is it that the divinity can find expression only in Lahiri Mahasaya? Or is it, as Yogananda and SRF teaches, that you can manifest this within yourself and you can find this full expression within yourself? And the Christ consciousness, can be manifested within each and every one of us. And it is such a beautiful, essentially, lesson indirect for that reason as well, that it's found its full expression. It's not like, some more kind of secular ideas of God and divinity, where it's like it's in that person and only that person, or what have you. It can be realized in each and every one of us. But it is actually on the point that we said earlier on, which is maybe a question of why didn't Yogananda really look to take Lahiri Mahasaya as a guru, given what he's saying here. It's found full expression in Lahiri Mahasaya. What more do you want? What more do you need? But actually, the road, the path that Yogananda went on, Sri Yukteswar was, a very, very good fit, let's say, for what he was looking for. But it is just amazing to see the acknowledgement of that, and him in such a young age as well, when he would have been recognizing this, it's exceptional.
What more you'd want? He wanted to play out this lila, this guru lila, that we talked about that word. It's really, all of that is really for our benefit, isn't it? Because you're right, he could have taken Lahiri Mahasaya. Actually, he could have had no guru, and he still would have been Paramahansa Yogananda, wouldn't he? But the lila is there for us to take and learn from. And the words before actually, I think, are just as important, Lauren, in this line. Like, for example, he says, with our united devotions, we offered the divinity that had found, we honored the divinity that had found full expression in Lahiri Mahasaya. So with our united devotion.
Yes.
Because in that, because in self-realization fellowship, and Guruji teaches us, it's not just Kriya. You don't just practice Kriya, you have to practice Kriya plus devotion, and it works like mathematics. And it can't, it takes you to your goal. But and also it's in the self-realization fellowship, is also in the names, and the fellowship element is there. And this is, the mothers and sons united devotions are part of that fellowship, early fellowship that they had. And if you're lucky, then you'll also have with someone who's your superior, like your parent or a teacher when you were young.
I also think that the way we look at a picture of a deity is different than we would look at the picture of a loved one or like a family member. Like when I have like a picture of my mom standing there, I look at it and it reminds me the memories that we had together, right? The person. But a picture of Lahiri Mahasaya or any of the gurus, Guruji teaches us to visualize those pictures at our spiritual eye, right? And feel their presence. And of course, just by doing that, you will feel their blessings coming onto you. And so you have a different relationship. And those pictures are really just a way to get into this consciousness of feeling the presence of the guru, whereas that's not something you would do with a picture of anyone else. So it's a very special way, and I feel like he beautifully describes that in just one sentence here.
And also going off of that, Mike, actually it's again teaching us that we can still have these really beautiful heartfelt connections with many of the masters that are full of love, and that can give us so much. And there is absolutely something that we can or should be doing, yet we still have our guru, who is, that special bond for us. But yeah, it's certainly, there's so much in one line, and there is, as with the rest of the book, always something to delve into and read. But I think we will delve into a little bit more of this. So Mike, would you like to read for us?
Absolutely.
Maybe give some pre-introduction.
Context?
Yes, that'd be lovely.
Yes. So this is from Man's Eternal Quest, and it's Guruji. He's talking about we should not have a graven image and worship it. Like when we have a symbol, like for example, I have like the Om symbol here hanging on the wall, or like a picture of a deity. It should have a meaning, and that there should only be one meaning to it, right? That this is your connection to God, right? This is the person you follow, and you feel like this is the person who will show you God eventually. And it should not have any other meaning. It's not like the crest of a football team or anything like that. It is really something sacred. And Guruji talks about this in Man's Eternal Quest, and I'm just going to read the paragraph. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. That's, of course, a quote from the Bible. And he explains symbol worship is all right for a few, but it has more bad than good results. To worship the cross of Christ and forget what the cross stands for is to worship a graven image, because you have lost sight of its significance. When a great spiritual teacher passes on his image or some symbol of his life, is usually kept and venerated. And this is all right, provided you remember and emulate his qualities. But if you worship an image without conscious regard for what it represents, then you have forgotten the infinite. To have a picture or a statue of Jesus is acceptable if it helps you to dwell on his divine qualities. then you are not worshiping a graven image, but the ideal the image represents to you. Whatever worship ritual you perform with the consciousness of spirit is pleasing to the Lord. But in Moses' time, many worshippers had forgotten God. They were venerating mere objects, even sacrificing goats to them.
I resonate with that, because ever since I was young, I used to, because in India, in Hinduism, we do a lot of worship with symbology and the symbols that different gods have and things like that. So I used to just never, even now I don't resonate with it well. So like when I found this path that use minimal or actually no symbology in terms of idols and things like that, it really helped me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Priyank. And I think wherever you grow up, you are surrounded by symbols that when you're a kid, they seem sometimes meaningless or the meaning has been distorted. As an example, I would say, like, I grew up in Austria, very conservative, very Catholic Christian country. And by law, every classroom in every school had to have a cross hanging there. Also a picture of the president, which I don't know, yeah. But also a cross. And then you grow up like that and you don't think much of it. It's just there. But nobody came in and said, like, you know, the meaning of this cross. And sometimes they even have those crosses where you actually see a picture of Jesus on the cross, right? And as a kid, this is not a nice thing to look at. And people, they don't really explain that, say, you know, we put this cross here, it should remind you of God, of infinity. You know, nobody does that. It's more like, you know, this is what you should be believing in. Like, this is what we do here. So I kind of resonate with what Priyank said, that we are often surrounded by things and we don't really I think I thought of this as an example of a graven image.
A few years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said I had a great interest in symbology in the world of the occult and what things meant, to such an extent that my wife, actually, for her birthday years ago, she bought me a book on symbology just to say what things sort of meant. And it is fascinating, but ultimately leaves one lacking. You know, the intellectual curiosity will take you so far, and this is what Guruji said, that a saintly man or a saintly individual can teach you so much more than what any kind of intellectual path could. In his example, and I guess this is what Guruji was saying, which was this full expression of divinity was in Lahiri Mahasaya. So you can have all the symbology you want, but ultimately, he was able to see the true expression of that behind what's behind the symbology in the form of Lahiri Mahasaya. Very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And he obviously felt very connected with it, because he then goes on to say how, you know, this image had such a profound significance in his life and influence even. And, you know, he expresses to us that in meditation, he would see the form of Lahiri Mahasaya come out of the photograph and then sit with him. And then as soon as he tried to, you know, touch his feet, he would disappear and go away again. And Priyank posed a very lovely question, which was imagination or reality? Chris, what do you think?
I mean, reality, simply put, reality. Like to me, I think, you know, we know the strength and power of Guruji's prayer and his intensity that he has with his concentration. So no doubt that's going to be heard loud and clear by those that he's directing his thoughts to. He often speaks about, you know, prayer through a broken microphone. Usually is what we might have, and you have to go about repairing that microphone so that God can hear you speak and praying. And you can do that through meditation, but Guruji had no such limitations. So I'm going to say quite easily on this one, maybe full manifestation of reality. What I would actually ask, because I think that's almost a rhetorical question in a sense, is why did Lahiri Mahasaya vanish when his fit was touched? That's a more curious question for me. Mike.
I'm going to pass on that one. But
You've got a good answer for that.
Okay. So you want to go right now, Priya?
Yeah. The question was imagination or reality, and is the answer not that? What's the difference?
No, I think there's a big difference, is it not? Because Guruji talks about this in lesson 50, the old one. Sorry, again, I keep referring. He simply says, be careful who you might follow in terms of a guru. You know, are they simply hearing the thought of God in their head through imagination, or is it reality? So I guess what he's inferring there is that there is a difference.
I was thinking more of the dream analogy. This life is just a dream image, which is the imagination of God, and we then are also free to create our own dream images. And if they're that potent that we can, in our dream, manifest the presence of Lahiri Mahasaya, then what is the difference between our imagination or him really being there? Because ultimately the dreamer's dream and the God's dream, this creation.
Mike doesn't want to answer the question out of the way.
Now I want to answer the original question, if it's imagination or reality, because I feel like this is the best case scenario when you look at a deity's picture, because we always, like when I was a kid and my parents showed me pictures even of Yogananda, I was like, okay, so what should I do with that now? Like, because I didn't have that connection as a kid. And this is sometimes Guruji says, like, when you meditate, you should, if you don't feel like you're peaceful, if you don't feel like you're going deep, maybe one way to get there is to imagine that you're doing this, just to focus your mind on it. And Guruji is giving us a blueprint here. If you are an avatar and you look at Lahiri Mahasaya's picture, he will become real for you, right? And you will have those moments. And I feel like Priyank mentioned earlier, Guruji could have just been born as an avatar, known everything, and done all his job without the whole Leela around him. But I feel like he did this whole Leela happened, and then he wrote it all down in this book for us to understand how it happened.
It's that notion of, I am as far away as you think I am. I'm butchering the quote here. I believe it's from Paramahansa Yogananda, but he's basically talking about God and also the gurus. If we think they are far, then they are. And if we think they're near, then that's as near as they are.
I think the quote might be, to those who think me near, I am nearer than the near. Is that correct? And dearer than the dear. Perhaps.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. See, Priyank always pulls through. This is why we need you on this podcast. You bring all the knowledge. But yeah, it's certainly for Yogananda, that image of Lahiri Mahasaya was so strong for him. And he goes on to say that it becomes this enlightening presence in his life. And, when he would go through trials or confusions or anything in life where he was unsure, he would pray to him fervently, and he would find a solace there, which again goes back to an interesting discussion of, he didn't take him on as his guru. He innately knew that was not for him, but still he found that connection, and that God spoke through Lahiri Mahasaya, which is quite beautiful.
As we're talking about this, I'm getting flashbacks of my own childhood, and my mum is a Roman Catholic, and she has pictures of saints all over the house, like everywhere. And she has pictures of Jesus, everywhere, and they're beautiful pictures of Jesus. You know, they're really, really nice. They're obviously, very, very similar to the one that we would have with SRF pictures. And I grew up with that, seeing it everywhere, in the cars, you know, at home, in the kitchen. So you'd open up a cupboard, and there's Jesus looking at you. And actually, looking back on that, it's so beautiful to have that, because you're constantly reminded of the present. And even just being reminded of the presence of a master brings your attunement closer, even if it is just for that moment, that the moments add up and help guide you back. And there was a challenge that really stuck with me, which is all day, every day, think about God. Always have your mind on God. And if you could do nothing else, you know, in practice, meditation, if you could just live your life like that, you know, how great would the world be? And so, you know, these pictures help toward doing that as well. Like, whether or not, you know, a guru might manifest in front of you, they're just great tools to have in your arsenal toward your spiritual path.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's a very subtle way, isn't it? Like, even in here, he says, he describes Lahiri Mahasaya as a secret omnipotence. So even there's like a hush, you know, and it's there, but it's to those who seek and those who know, right? And it's quite a lovely thing, you know. It's like you were saying, you know, if we just tune in, we know it's there. Yeah. And then the Lahiri Mahasaya is quoted because he goes on to say how much he grieved the fact that the Lahiri Mahasaya wasn't here, and, you know, he wished he could, you know, see him physically. And the Lahiri Mahasaya apparently said, "Why come to view my flesh and bones when I am ever within range of your Katushta, spiritual sight?" Chris?
Yes, sorry, I think he said this to disciples, right, who were over anxious. Yeah,
correct.
But just in case people interpreted it differently if they're not reading along. And to me, I actually have a critique, and I wanted your view on this, guys, of the Autobiography of Yogi, because sometimes I'm reading it and I'm not sure when these thoughts might have occurred, or I'm not sure if they were reflections, if they were really thoughts at the time, or exactly the timeline of certain instances. But I suppose in essence, answering my own kind of question, maybe it just doesn't matter. But Mike, I'll throw it over to you.
Oh, no, okay. I thought I didn't understand the question really that came now, but I can talk about one thing that I found very curious, that we talked about earlier. Like, this kind of means you don't have to come see me in person. Focus on your Kutastha, right? And I will be there. But then Guruji, he kind of was always looking for a living guru, right? He made no such, he wasn't like, oh yeah, my parents are followers of Lahiri Mahasaya, so I can be. That was never an option for him, right? For him, he went straight to, I want to be in an ashram, I want to be trained, I want to have a living guru who reveals God to me.
You could interpret the other way, in the sense that he even though he did that, he kind of preaches that you don't need to do that. So we also go through that phase in our lives, don't we? We think, oh, I really need a physical guru, and then we go after. I personally went after all these ashrams, but found that I did not need any of that exploration, because there's no such thing as a physical anyway. Going back to the dream thing. So maybe hypothesizing that he did that, performed that leela, so we wouldn't feel so bad when we have we have that desire ourselves, and we actually go and explore that desire ourselves as he did. Because even after he found Sri Yukteswar, he was still like wandering around, wasn't he? And then he became like, Sri Krishna was like, you don't need to go to the Himalayas, you know, everything you need is right here. So he, even after so these leelas that you have to really like reflect on them, and I think a lot of it is about like the sympathy that God has for like us as you know, in our wayward ways, in terms of how we approach our connection with the divinity. Chris, what was your question? I actually had a answer for it. I've forgotten though. What was your question again?
So what we were talking about the disciples, yeah, the critique was timelines, timescales.
Oh yes,
like,
yes. I've got an answer for that, I think. Are you reading the book as a historical analysis of a life, or are you reading the book as a scripture that tells you all the deepest answers to life's questions? Because if you're reading it as the former, then you should probably go read the biography by Phil Goldberg. But if you're reading it as a life transforming experience, then you should be more concerned with the latter.
Yeah, exactly. I think that sort of answers itself. But curious as to whenever we're reading this again, I'm like, oh, did he have this at the time? Was it, you know, I have more questions to my mind just when we're looking at it with a fine-tooth comb. But it doesn't matter, I think is the answer. It's the latter.
Always stay curious though. But yeah, it's the balance, isn't it, of knowing when is enough for the intellectual mind and just to know it inwardly. But for anyone who's listening, I mean, I'm guessing a lot of people who are watching or listening have delved a little deeper, but just in case there isn't, we will delve into it. You might be thinking, what is a spiritual sight? What does that mean? What is that? So I thought it'd be nice to just give an overview of what's out there and what's been learned. So when they talk about the spiritual eye, it's not a physical thing in the body. We don't physically have a third eye or a spiritual eye, like an eyeball coming out of our brain. That would be frightening.
Even though it's drawn that way. It is one of the things I dislike about the whole symbology. And they take things literally, and then they draw the third eye, physical third eye. And then
then we get into all sorts of trouble, don't we? Because there's, Mike.
But the third eye does exist on our astral bodies, right?
Yes.
Yogesh talks about it. And so that's why it kind of, if you kind of say, okay, I don't see this person as the body, but I see this person maybe as the divinity in them. The astral body is like one step closer to that. Maybe that's kind of how it makes sense.
But it's difficult to represent an astral concept on a physical plane.
I agree with that, because you've never seen one.
Yeah, that's true. But even the descriptions that we have of them, like describing the third, we got a description of the third, like Lauren's about to just talk us through it. But describing it and drawing, like imagining it physically is just it's a bit of an insane concept. But I really love this. I think this is another highlighter moment thing for me, like why come to view my flesh and bones when I'm ever within range of your kutastha, the spiritual sight. I think it's just mind-blowing. It's like scripture, isn't it? It is scripture.
Yeah, you could easily like glaze over that line, but actually it's so profound. And yet it's so simple, but it's so much harder to do in reality. It takes a long while to get there, but there are no words. Ineffable, I think, is the correct description for that. But so the spiritual eye on a physical plane, not literally there, but it's said to be a light which is visible behind the darkness of closed eyes. And where, when we're meditating, we can actually gaze through that light and we can see into more subtler realms. So it's a reflection of that cosmic energy. Yes, Priyank.
I think Guruji, does he describe it as opal blue, yes, with golden rings around the outside, and then with a 5-pointed star in the middle. And then
Yes.
the whole of creation is also represented in those three things as well, which we'll come to on a later episode, I think.
Well, actually, we were just about to come on to it. Crystal's going to tell us some more about it, but that's good.
Sorry.
You're already delving in. No, you've given us a nice little introduction. So yeah, Chris, would you like to give us some more info?
Sure. It's also known, as we've mentioned, as the third eye, the star of the east, the inner eye of Shiva, eye of intuition, the single eye of intuition, and omnipresent perception at the Christ Kutashta center between the eyebrows. The deeply meditating devotee beholds the spiritual eye as a ring of golden light, as Priyanka has kindly said, and microcosmically, these forms and colors epitomize respectively the vibratory realm of creation, the cosmic nature, Holy Ghost, the sun or intelligence of God in creation, the Christ consciousness, and the vibrationless spirit beyond all creation, God the Father.
The spirit, yeah. Sorry, Chris. The spiritual eye is the entryway into the ultimate states of divine consciousness. In deep meditation, as the devotee's consciousness penetrates the spiritual eye into the three realms epitomized therein, he experiences successively the following states: superconsciousness, or the ever-new joy of soul realization, and oneness with God as Om, or Holy Ghost; Christ consciousness, one with the universal intelligence of God in all creation; and cosmic consciousness, unity with the omnipresence of God that is beyond as well as within vibratory manifestation.
We'll just leave that there. There's so much that's in there. Yeah, Mike.
So profound, the spiritual eye, and it's basically the goal of every spiritual seeker. And that's why SRF put it right bang in the middle of their logo, because that's really what we're looking for when we are looking for God.
Yeah. It's also said to represent the human form too. So the star is the head. When you put out your arms and legs, you're meant to be the 5-point of the star. Yeah, Priyank?
Is that the Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man? Is it that one?
Oh, I don't know.
He's got a representation of that in one of his famous drawings. I also love, like, I know you talked about this, but the secret omnipresence, it reminded me of a story. Like the sentences, at first I grieved because he was no longer physically living, i.e. Lahiri Mahasaya, when he passed. As I began to discover his secret omnipresence, I lamented no more. And then he talks about the why come and see my flesh and bones. And I remember a story that one of the monks told us when they were here. This story was like, this was 10 years ago, so etched in my memory. There was a devotee in one of the centers in South America, and she was very new, and she just started serving at the center that she was in. And she said, "Oh, where can I serve?" And they said, "Oh, why don't you prepare the flowers for the altar, or for Guruji's image on the side?" And she was like, "Yeah, really excited to do that." And she like put a lot of thought into it, and she really spent her whole heart into doing it, and she was really feeling devotional. And then the person who asked her to do this activity saw her work, and she's like, "That's all wrong. What are you doing? That's completely wrong. I can't believe we gave you this task, and we're gonna have to start all over again." And this other devotee who did this new devotee was absolutely distraught at this response, and she was obviously very upset, and she was thinking, should I, maybe this isn't the right path for me? So she was like questioning the path and Guruji and all those kind of things, because she must have thought signs were important. So she was having these, she was having this troubling time. And then a few days later or something, her mum came to see her, and they had this talk, and she hadn't told her mum about Yogananda, about this center or anything. And her mum said to this devotee, she was like, "Oh, I had the strangest dream, and it was strangely about you and not about you." And she was like, "Oh yeah, what was the dream?" And she said, "Oh, there was this man in really long orange robes, and he had this long hair, and he said something really strange." And I said, "What was it?" And she said, "Tell your daughter I really love the flowers."
No way.
Yeah.
Goosebumps.
And then obviously that's secret omnipotence. I think it hints to that, because sometimes it is a secret. It is subtle. And those kind of stories really inspire us.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, oh, well, like he's here right now. Oh, but in a way that I suppose that's how we should live our lives. If we were in the presence, or we are in the presence, but physically, if we're in the presence of our guru or the great masters, how would we actually live? Probably a bit differently. We think we're let off the hook because we're not in the physical presence, but actually it's all seeing, all knowing. Yeah, Mike.
That's one of the things you have to try as a devotee, right? To always keep his presence there. And even recording a podcast like this is something that constantly reminds me of his life and brings him closer to me. I myself also listen to our episodes afterwards. So then I feel like those kind of moments, whatever you do, or I like to listen to the Autobiography of a Yogi or read some of his books. Like feeling his presence is a very comforting thing in my life right now. And if I wouldn't feel his presence at all, I would get scared. I would like, oh my God, what's going on? So it's like something you build up gradually, and then you kind of never want it to go away.
And then yesterday, we did in the young adults meeting, we did an introspection exercise that Lux led. Lux, one of our previous attendees, guests on the show. She made us do what in your ideal life, where do you spend your primary amount of time or efforts or energies? Where do you spend your secondary things that you prioritize? And then what should you be doing as fillers? That's your ideal, like perfect version of yourself. What would that be? And then you write all that out, spend 5 minutes. And then secondly, then you write what you're actually putting in your primary column, what actually is in your secondary, and obviously, and what is in your fillers. And you'll find that they're often like inverse to where they should be. And one of the things that Laura and I were talking about is we spend too much time on Instagram or Facebook. and I put to counter that, I was like, how am I going to like counter that? So I was like, okay, so instead of like when I've got a dead zone, i.e. when I'm commuting or something, rather than just clicking on my phone, perhaps I could just inwardly sing, do a song, inward song that sing a song that none has sung. Yes. Perhaps I could visualize God and gurus, and these really simple things. And for example, when I'm eating, rather than watching the TV, I could actually just really perhaps close my eyes and just enjoy the experience of eating. So these are like obviously very, very simple things that we can do. But I thought it was quite related to this quote that we love: "Why come to view my flesh and bones when I'm ever within range of your kutashta, or spiritual sight?" Because this doesn't mean that we're off the hook, because say we're not going to see his flesh and bones, the gurus, and we're also not looking within for our kutashta, looking within. So if you're not doing either, then then you're really in trouble. And especially in my case, if I'm spending more time than I should I could be utilizing my time better in terms of looking within and, you know, being more conscious and things like that, of all those things that I said that I could do when I've got a dead period of time.
What is it I heard something the other day, I think it was from a talk from one of the monks, basically saying how our efforts now sort of go into our astral bank account, so to speak. So we may not necessarily recognize not that we should be doing it for the fruits of our efforts anyway, but we may not recognize anything outwardly that's changing, but actually it's all adding to that good karma. Yeah, Mike.
Guruji often talks about when we do an activity that we try to somehow fill it with his presence or with God's presence. And I had to think, like, when you guys are on Instagram, how much time of it do you actually put spiritual content on? A lot, I assume. So it's actually already like you're already spiritualizing even the things that you feel like you should do less of.
Yeah, I actually joked about that yesterday, because I said, well, I just follow loads of spiritual accounts, right? So that comes up, I'm learning.
Mike's such a good motivator. Make you feel good.
Keep going, yeah.
You got this.
Life coach.
It does make you think, you know, the amount of time we spend in like devotion and practicing that presence, how much that can actually impact our life now and potentially, you know, in the future. You know, here Paramahansa Yogananda had built that connection, hadn't he, with Lahiri Mahasaya? He'd already got that heart-centered devotion and love. He'd got the omnipotence, and he'd felt that throughout his life. And then, as it goes on to say, he comes into a point of his life where he needs him. Yeah, Priyank.
Yeah, needing is the interesting one, because like Guruji in this you know, in this sentence, Guruji says, I frequently pray to him in moments of trial or confusion, finding within me his solacing direction. And I was just thinking how often I do that. I don't do it enough. I feel I need to work on, personally, I need to work on like how to do that. I've just got this thing where Guruji knows what I want.
Yeah.
What I need, what my trial is, what the solution is, he knows. And then I never actually like have that conversation, or very infrequently I have that conversation. I should do it much more.
It's funny that you say that, Priyank, because this is I have this, I call it technique, but it's really just, I have Guruji's books lying around everywhere in my house, and I just grab them sometimes, read a line or two, and then put it back. And then I feel like this line oftentimes corresponds to what challenges I'm going through or what I'm thinking about. And recently I've had a lot of those lines where it said, some people, they say they trust in God, but they don't really trust in God. And that when you pray, you say like, thy will be done. You actually have to mean it. Thy will be done, right? You cannot say thy will be done, but actually I want this. You have to say thy will be done. You have a great plan for my life, and I trust that the way you do it, it will be fine, and I'm not trying to interfere with it at all. And it takes a lot of love and trust towards the Guru. And when you just said that, it reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Also be done. Yeah.
Be very mindful when you make such a promise, because life will change. And they'll say, I told you so, and you just got to keep on with that. But yeah, I would love to delve in. Yes, Chris, what are you going to say?
Sorry, it did. I wasn't going to share, but one of my favorite sayings is that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And there's something with that where it's like the little ego might say, oh, I plan to do this by this time, do this by this stage of my life. Sometimes that is necessarily proven to be not the case. But as Mike said, it's a beautiful thing just to be grateful for the life that God gives you. and not try to create something that's maybe less in some way.
Yeah, the Mike's quote of that, "Thy will be done," and then is the second bit of it, "not mine." Don't know if that's in there, and then "thou art the doer, not I."
Not I.
Yeah.
It actually starts with "I am nothing, thou art the doer."
Oh, cool. "I am nothing, thou art the doer," and then "thy will be done, not mine."
Yeah.
Lovely.
Very lovely indeed. Shall we go on to the meaty part of the paragraph? Okay. So it's really well, it's hard to describe in a couple of words, but it's quite a transformation for his path, I would say. We won't read it verbatim, but basically to summarize what happens is at the age of 8, Paramahansa Yogananda was he came down with asiatic chorea, and it's basically a fatal disease, especially at that time, incurable. And apparently the doctors sort of said, we can't do anything more for this boy. And at his bed, he's laying there, his mother frantically says, and I will read this part, she says, she points to the picture of Lahiri Mahasaya above the wall, above his bed, and she says, "Bow to him mentally. If you really show your devotion and inwardly kneel before him, your life will be spared." And then he said he gazed at his photograph and he saw a blinding light, which enveloped his whole body and the entire room. And then his symptoms vanished, disappeared, and he got up and he bowed down at his mother's feet, and he touched his mother's feet in appreciation and faith in her guru, as he puts it, her guru. And apparently then his mother, he prayed to Lahiri Mahasaya and, gave her thanks for that cure through the light which came through that photograph. Yes, Chris.
Here's a question for you. Does this apply to everybody, regardless of karma? If you're unwavering faith in a guru, if you had a guru, does that then mean logically that if you were to put the faith entirely in the guru, as we've seen here in this story, that if you were going through some health problem, that it could and would be healed? Or is there some kind of law where the karmic law has to step in to put you through the situation? I don't know.
That's an excellent question. You don't hear often of those stories where people were sick and they prayed and then they died, right? Those are not the stories that people...
Well, no, you wouldn't hear it because they're dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's in the astral diaries.
There are those stories later in the book where Sri Yukteswar had his friend who was sick, and Lahiri Mahasaya was curing him, but he waited quite long. He waited until he actually died and then brought him back from the dead. I think the it really, it's what Chris said, it depends on your karma, I guess, and maybe also on how strong your trust is in the guru. I wouldn't say it's like a guarantee. You just say, okay, I have a guru. I just say I pray now, and now I'm not gonna die. That's the end of the story, right? I don't think that's really how it works. Yeah, Lauren.
But also remember that Lahiri Mahasaya wasn't his guru. He never once took him as his guru. He was, this master, this divine incarnation of God. So again, that adds another layer for us, doesn't it? Healing is infinitely available through infinite sources because God is infinite in nature. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I feel like in this healing, the roles are slightly different than we are usually used to. Like usually we feel like there's like one person, there's a guru, and then one of his disciples goes to him and asks for healing, and he's being healed. But now we get it as a first-person perspective, right? Where Guruji prays to the guru of their parents, and as we saw earlier, it was like he had a strong connection to him, right? Like he looked at his picture and it became real to him, and there was something there that was, and he was, like we mentioned in the previous episode, in India there's also this tendency to have like a guru for the whole family, where you kind of, that's probably also why that's why we suspect they went with baby Mukunda to Lahiri Mahasaya and had him blessed. And so, yeah, but still, it's an interesting dynamic, and you see how it is as from the perspective of someone who's being healed.
Yeah, faith moves mountains, and going back to that divine ratio that Guruji teaches us, where 25% is our effort, 25% is the Guru's support and blessings, and the other 50% is the grace of God. So we just have to take care of that 25%. But prayer is obviously a part of that, and we have to perform that prayer, that 25% prayer, and then the rest can hopefully come. Yeah, I was going to say something else as well. Lost my train of thought.
It'll come back to you. But I do find it interesting that she never says pray to Lahiri Mahasaya. She says bow to him mentally, show your devotion and inwardly kneel. Because I was thinking about, the power of prayer and everything like that. But actually, in this case, it's sort of a bloodline for me in intellectually thinking about it, because actually it doesn't seem here that he offers a prayer. He doesn't ask Lahiri Mahasaya for anything. He doesn't ask him for healing. He doesn't ask him to make him better. He simply bows down in devotion mentally. And through that comes this healing light. And I think, again, it's another grey area, because his mother did say, then you will be freed. So perhaps there was a slight hope, but who knows? It's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, actually, there was just love and devotion, and that, again, that, okay, you are this master, you are this incarnation, and you have my love. Mike, what do you think?
Absolutely. I find one thing that I wanted to mention is that how Guruji's so positive when he describes his upbringing in India. So he describes the dynamic between his parents, the job that his father had. At no point, like any other biographer would have said, yeah, it was tough times. That in like Asia or South Asia had like 7 cholera epidemics in the 19th century alone, right? And each one of them took hundreds of thousands of lives of people. And so everyone was probably thinking about this. And he never mentioned it once. He mentioned he had it himself and he was miraculously cured, but then he moves on. So he's always so positive with everything that he describes around him.
Do you think it was, going back to Lauren's point about she just asked him to bow, do you think this miracle occurred mathematically? Do you think this miracle occurred because it was the devotion of his mum, or do you reckon it was the sincerity, devotion element of Mukunda bowing down, or do you think both were required for that healing, the miraculous healing, to occur? Lauren?
No, let Chris go.
Chris, go on, Chris.
I was going to say it's another cheeky question from Priyank there, talking about an avatar.
Talking about the Leela.
For the Leela, yes. For the Leela, we know the the emotion that Yogananda had for his mother, and the strength then that would be able to shatter any perceptions of reality to reveal God. I think that's so strong with Yogananda, his love for his mother. So no doubt that would have played some mathematical, part in that formula. But it is interesting what you said, Lauren, the difference between the action and the of prayer and simply the action of devotion, in a sense that it's the difference, maybe to my mind, to some people kind of trying to believe, and some people really knowing it to be true in a way that he's actually bowing, he's actually acting there, that the presence of Lahiri Mahasaya is there. So it's like he is simply before him. There's no question to that. So it is a very beautiful thing. I did have a small part, but I'll maybe come back to it, because maybe Lauren, you want to give your comments on this before we move on.
No, go ahead, Chris, go ahead.
I was curious that we hear Yogananda talking about the emotions and positive and negative emotions, and if you have a positive, a negative emotion, the way to counter that is actually to repeatedly think, say and act of the opposite of that emotion, that negative emotion or that negative thought. So if you take this instance of faith, having this, unshakable faith, this ironclad faith, the opposite to that might be doubt. Now, if you could say, okay, well, how many devotees on this sort of path would have that ironclad faith? And how many might fall short of that? Well, actually, then what do you do to try to shore that up? What do you do to try to get that level? And if we could practice that, so if we take this story, which is there maybe for our own learning, how do we get there? It's like maybe you work on faith. If you have doubts, you work on having the opposite, or you pray simply to relieve your doubts, to have them abolished, beyond any reasonable doubt. So yeah, maybe this introspectiveness and time to pause on this beautiful story about our own situation then is something that can reap great rewards in the future. That's all.
I just wanted to add another theory on why he said bow. Because if you go by all the other stories where a healing occurs, it usually happens like this. It usually happens like, my friend is ill, you have to help him, Guruji. Then Guruji says that your friend has to do this and that. He has to buy a diamond or whatever, or drink the oil from there, and then he will be healed, right? So I'm guessing Guruji's mother, who was very spiritually advanced, prayed to Lahiri Mahasaya day and night, and he came to her in a vision and said, "Tell your son to bow to me, and he will be healed." And then she passed it on. That's kind of the theory that I had when I saw this.
And they did both witness the event, didn't they? Which is another tie back to his father and how he got initiated on the path. It was a shared experience. And with this healing, again, it was a shared experience. And going back to what Priyank was asking, it said before, our united devotions. So they were already connected in their devotion. So perhaps, again, that's why that healing was visibly present for both parties, because perhaps, they had a part to play, didn't they?
It's like the worldwide prayer circle that we do, and we pray in unison. It it brings up the energy like that much more, like amplification, more than the sum of its parts, basically.
Yeah. It's also interesting that he testifies that healing through the photograph. He doesn't mention that he comes to him in a form. He says it directly comes through the image of Lahiri Mahasaya, which is yeah, very curious. But it's not the first time that Lahiri Mahasaya comes, is it, to visit Paramahansa Yogananda or his family. So it's happened with his father, happened with his mother, and Priyank shared a story with us from what book is it from, Priyank?
Mejda.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I thought it might be a nice little way to finish the episode with a recounting of that tale, unless anyone has anything to discuss before we do.
No.
Seeing some shakes of heads. No, we're good. Okay. Priyank, would you like to give us a little prerequisite, if that's the right word?
So first we started this meeting about I was confused about when Lahiri Mahasaya's passing was, and Lauren was absolutely right. It was 1896.
1895.
1895. Yeah, so that was right. So Yogananda Mukunda was only 2 years old when he passed. And the reason I was confused is because this story that we're about to share, where in 1906, where Guruji would have been 13, this beautiful occasion happened where Lahiri Mahasaya, he had the darshan of the physical form of Lahiri Mahasaya. And we're about to just tell you the story. So guys, if you open that card at the bottom. So this is in Mejda, and Mejda is the book that Sananda Lal Ghosh has written, and Mejda means it's the Bengali term for the second eldest brother. I think I got that wrong in the past. I might have said middle brother or something.
Middle.
But yeah. So it's the second eldest, corrected now. So this story is from Mejda, and it's it'll speak for itself. This is how young Mukunda at the age of 13, and his little brother, who would have been 5 years his junior, would actually have was with him as well. So he not only is he writing this from a perspective of what Mukunda shared about this experience, he was actually there as an eyewitness. So this is quite phenomenal. Lauren, you said from March onwards.
No. So Mike, do you want to start off reading the story?
Oh, Mike, yes, please.
Yes. Ananta had directed all of us children to be home by early evening every day, to wash and to begin our homework by 6 o'clock. The harbor at Chittagong was about 4 kilometers from home. Thus, after returning from school and taking tiffin, we couldn't walk the round trip distance of 8 kilometers, be back at a specified time. So we used to run all the way to the harbor, watch the ships for a short while, then run home. From all the sprinting, Mejda became an excellent athlete. I too became a pretty good one, but not nearly so much so as Mejda, a point we'll discuss in more detail later on.
The road to the mouth of the river followed several low hills. Fruit hung in abundance in the trees along our way. One day Mejda said, "Listen, when we return this evening, we'll pick some lychees. No one will see us in the twilight." So said, so done. Mejda was picking some of the luscious sweet lychees when he heard someone call his name. Startled, Mejda stood shocked still. Oops, sorry, I just clicked out of it by accident. All sense of adventure ended abruptly. Cautiously, we moved in the direction from which the voice had come. The twilight was fast fading, and we could not see far ahead in the shadows. But we soon discerned a man dressed in white. Seeing that we were somewhat afraid, he beckoned us closer in a friendly manner. If he were the watchman here, how would he have known Mejda's name?
Slowly, we advanced toward the gently smiling person. Think we may be having a clue as to who this is. His form seemed lustrous with a wonderful light. I looked around to see where the light was coming from. Suddenly, Mejda bowed before the saint and touched his feet. The saint embraced Mejda and kissed him on the head. I also bowed to the saintly figure. With a gesture of blessing, he said to us, Jayatsu, meaning let God grant you victory. And then he spoke to Mejda. Mukunda, it is God's wish that I come to you today. Remember what I say to you. You have come on this on earth as God's representative to fulfill his wishes. Your body is his temple, sanctified by prayer and meditation. Do not run after material pleasures or satisfaction. You will show the way that leads to true happiness, and by your spiritual knowledge, you will deliver those who are suffering in ignorance. Never forget that you are the one. You are one with Mahapurusha, great God, attained only by those who are supremely successful in meditation. Your body, mind, and life must never deviate from the thought of God, even for a moment. The blessings of the Infinite Father are upon you. Your faith in him must be absolute. He will protect you from all dangers in this world. In this world, only he is eternal. All else is transient and unreliable. One day, your ideals of yoga will inspire all mankind. Mukunda, march onward.
I was fidgeting. I'm guessing this is his brother.
Yeah.
For time was passing and darkness was upon us. We had a long way to go to reach home. A scolding by father and a beating from Ananta. Do we know who Ananta was? Was it the mother?
Eldest brother.
Eldest brother.
Eldest
were
brother.
Inevitable. The saint perceived my thought and said, do not be troubled. Go home freely. No one will notice that you are late. We started for home. After walking a short distance, we looked back and saw the saint blessing us with upraised hands. Then he vanished. I turned to Mejda and spoke, but he wasn't listening. He was walking head down in a thoughtful mood. When we reached home, Mejda went directly to his prayer room. I inquired where Father and Ananta were. I learned that Bada had been invited to a friend's home and that Father had not yet returned from an important meeting at the office. What joy! They did not know of our belated return. I ran to the prayer room to tell Mejda. But Mejda was coming to get me. He took hold of my hand and led me to a photograph that hung on the wall. We stood a moment before it. Then he said, do you not recognize him? Was it not he who spoke to us? I was astonished. It was he, that very smile. But he had died long ago. How could he have come to us now? How could we have talked with someone who had been dead all these years? He had blessed us, embraced Mejda and kissed his head. I was choked with awe, unable to speak. I simply looked at Mejda. There was no doubt that Mejda and I had seen and talked with the great Lahiri Mahasaya, the saint whose counsel was sought by householders and sages alike throughout all India, the preceptor to whom people had come in endless streams to receive blessings and spiritual instruction. With Mejda, I had seen the Yogavatar with my own eyes and talked with him. I am thrilled to this day whenever I recall that wondrous experience. It is forever etched in my memory. I am blessed. His endless mercy, his crowning grace is upon me. My gratitude knows no bounds.
Really, absolutely stunning story, isn't it? One that is, for some obscure, some reason we can hypothesize it is not in the autobiography of a yogi, but it certainly would deserve merit. It would have a letter of merit if it was. So we can perhaps hypothesize as to why it's not in the autobiography. But it's also interesting, you know, I was confused at the start of this episode and I thought, oh no, the dates must be off by 10 years because I knew that he was 13 when he had this experience. So in my mind, this was a physical notion, and this is how it's written, isn't it? He's physically just like resurrected. He's physically just kind of was teleported himself to this section, but actually it was a resurrection. So I got my memory completely wrong, and it was the resurrection of Lahiri Mahasaya. So that this little section could be actually called that. And what an absolutely wonderful image, isn't it, of young Mukunda being blessed in this way. Mike?
And what a blessing for Sananda as well, right? To just be there at a resurrection of Lahiri Mahasaya talking to them. And I was thinking about what you just said, Priya, like why it would merit being in the autobiography of yoga. It absolutely would, but I feel Guruji's too humble to do that. Like he would gladly talk about the miracles that other people performed for him, but his life was one big miracle, and so many of his disciples talked about the miraculous things that he did, but he hardly talks about them himself, right?
The other thing that we see there, and this is the first time I've heard this, so it really is amazing to read and listen to. He said that you're going to inspire all of mankind, and that's the first time that I've heard that, really, that one day your ideals of yoga will inspire all of mankind. It's the first that I'd really heard anything of that nature, which is amazing. And to your point, Mike, the blessing of Yogananda's brother simply being there is amazing, but his reaction is quite funny. I was fidgeting for some time. I was passing in the darkness. It's kind of just anxious to get back because he's thinking that he's going to be told off. I mean,
so he would have been like 8 though, yeah. I remember he was very young,
young with a restless mind, But then the actual reaction when he got back and realized who this was more the reaction I was expecting to have at that time. You know, he had it later when he realized that, gosh, that's exactly who it was, and he was kind of stupefied in that sense, similar to what Yogananda's father was when he saw him for that time. He was just a little bit stunned. But wonderful story.
I really like the bit in there where like Lahiri Mahasaya says Jai Atsu to them. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I had to look it up because we don't use that in many places. But Astu means let it be. So Jai is like victory. So it means it's like a guru would say to you, Jayatsu, let your victory be, let your wish be God's wish. So that's kind of what it means. It's quite a really, really beautiful blessing, I thought.
I also love the line here. It says, with Mejda, I had seen the Yoga Avatar with my own eyes and talked with him. And it hit me when we read that line of the divine presence of Yogananda, the fact he is this divine messenger. With him, we can reach the divine. With him, we can reach God. He will take us there. He is God's boatman. And it's interesting that it comes from his brother in this subtle way, but for me, just hearing that, it was like, it's again that confirmation of, with Guru, we can get there.
Indeed. And further hypothesizing as to why it's not in the autobiography is perhaps he knew that Sananda would write Mejda one day. Maybe even told him to write Mejda one day. And I didn't want to spoil it firstly, but secondly, it encourages us to read the other books. We think that the autobiography is like and lessons, that's it, we don't need to go any further, and obviously in a sense that's true, but look at these like beautiful golden diamond nuggets that are in Mejda that if you didn't read that, you're really missing out in life, aren't you? Missing out in the Yogananda life. Mike?
And I wonder how high this experience ranks on like his top 10 list or something, like, because those kind of things happen to him a lot, right? So he was he was probably thinking like, I have to put Jesus, and then like who else am I gonna put into the book?
Krishna, he had Krishna, didn't he, dancing in that window? Babaji.
Babaji multiple times.
Sri Yukteswar after his passing. And
endless list. Maybe like He was like, oh, so many chapters already. So.
Can't add any more. Well, I would say that's a lovely place to leave this episode. I feel like we've really delved into so much.
No, I don't want to leave.
I don't want to leave. Is there anything else anyone wants to discuss before we go? No? Okay. Well, actually, before we do, Priyank, because you don't want to leave, would you like to quickly brief our lovely watchers, listeners, about the next episode?
Yes, part 5 is our next episode. And in part 5, we'll be discussing the next 12 paragraphs of the book. So that is your homework, dear ones. And the next 12 paragraphs are mainly covering how the beautiful photograph of Lahiri Mahasaya came into existence, of which there is a equally miraculous story, you might say, in terms of certainly with space, playing with space, time, and physics, and all that kind of fun stuff. So, and what we'll also do is, seeing as we're enjoying Mejda so much, I think I might pull out a few more nice little stories from in there that we can talk about from Lahiri Mahasaya and young Mukunda's early life. But also then there's this very profound section about what is behind, what's behind the darkness of closed eyes, and God kind of literally tells him the answer. I will talk about that. It's pretty powerful. That's already quite powerful. Also, that'll require some introspection, I think, before we can get to that beautiful section. One for us all to introspect beforehand, I think.
Yes, so certainly not an episode to miss next time. I do just want to say thank you again to everyone who watches and listens to this. It's a joy to read your comments. We really love to read them, so do please keep sending your comments. Not to sound like a YouTuber here, but it is genuinely really lovely to read.
You didn't ask for like a review. Reviews are the optimum. I don't think we've ever
subscribe,
had a
review. What else is it?
On Apple or whatever. Yeah.
No,
all that stuff.
Your presence here with us is enough. So yes, we will see you on the next episode. Thank you again. Thank you all for joining. And Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.